Laurel and Vista Allegra 200 Years Luxury Brands Summit proudly present our fourth panel, Art. Artists and Brands, is that a love affair? We are pleased to announce our speakers, Max Vardukal, photographer, and Maura Marvau, Philips Auction House International Representative to Spain and Portugal. Panel conducted by Anant Sharma, Matter of Form CEO.
Okay, it's the end of the day. There's a surprise afterwards. We're going to talk about art, no strategy, no big concepts. Although art, I guess, in itself is a big concept. Okay, so basically, the title of this panel is, well, the theme of this panel is about the relationship between art and brands, which is obviously a pertinent theme in luxury. And it's pertinent because the relationship between art and brands sort of reflects the relationship between creativity and commerce, between the sort of winds of intuition versus the shackles of a commercial brief, which we can get into. And we couldn't ask for two better people to discuss these themes of artistry and value than Max and Maura. And I'm going to introduce them functionally before they then talk about their wonderful life journeys. But Max Vardukal is a world-renowned photographer. He has 40 years of experience, known for his strong signature photographic style with Yoshi Yakamoto. He's the first ever photographer of Indian origin to break into high European fashion. This was a big deal.
Thank you all for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, with visionary images that have been featured basically everywhere, in Paris Vogue, Vogue Italy, Vogue UK. I'm sure there's many more on the list. I've just missed them out for the purposes of brevity. Max also holds the rare distinction of being the second ever staff photographer at The New Yorker, with only the legend Richard Avedon in Prelude under Tina Brown. Max, after this, is off to Bhutan, where he's going to document the return of a sacred Buddhist relic from India. Max, personally, I wish I'd become a photographer. I'm going to go full talented Mr. Ripley, possibly, in your later years, steal your life, and I can get away with it because I'm brown too. And an intro to Maura, who also collects accolades. She's got a law degree and a master's in arts administration from New York University. She's worked for the United Nations and the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York. She's been part of a suite of cultural projects, has taught at seemingly every institution under the sun on themes of collecting, galleries and auctions, art markets, practices of collecting, and she coordinates a postgraduate program in curating and art markets as well as organizing international conferences and seminars. She is the representative in Portugal and Spain for the international auction house, Philips. She's also a current member of the advisory board of the UCP School of Arts and is on the board of the Bagos de Oro Association. Hopefully, did that pass the test?
Thank you so much.
Which promotes education and social integration of children and young people in the Douro region. She's a member of the jury of the Sovereign Art Foundation. I'm also going to introduce myself. I'm an innovation and craft enthusiast. My name's Anant. I run Matter of Form. It's a design company. We work with top luxury brands globally, people like Aman Resorts, LVMH, Zaha Hadid, Neom. We also do weird things like design astronaut experience for spaceflight. We're designing new rituals for Jumeirah, the hotel group. And I host a podcast called What the Lux and sit on the board of the UK Crafts Council, as well as teaching an MBA in strategy at EHL in Switzerland. I love the hospitality industry. I just think it's a beautiful place. More recently, you might remember me from great hits such as the 2:45 p.m. panel with TikTok. I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction, basically, to this panel. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction to this panel. I'm going to do an introduction to this panel, and then we're going to go into a bit of Q&A. But the intersection of art and fashion has a rich history, dating back to the early 20th century. In the 30s, famously, fashion designer Ella Schiaparelli collaborated with surrealist artist Salvador Dali and Jean Cocteau to create wearable pieces that blurred the line between fashion and art. Later on in the 80s, people like Keith Haring collaborated with brands like Swatch and Vivienne Westwood, creating designs that became iconic symbols of an era. On our own What the Lux podcast, we recently had a fascinating chat with Jeff Staple. I recommend listening, the designer of the infamous Nike Pigeon sneaker. I don't know if you've heard of the Nike Pigeon sneaker, but there were riots in New York in '95 for this shoe. Right? There was a seminal moment where streetwear, graffiti, and popular culture really melded. It was really, really interesting, actually, the context of it all. And since then, right, we've seen fuzzier edges, right? More play, more levity and luxury, more interesting collaborations, right? Routes to new markets and new audiences through collaboration and artistry. So today, we seek to explore the line between artistry and creativity as a route to commerce. Art, design, innovation, and craft, these are inextricably linked themes. Right? They feed each other, and their relationship creates cultural narrative. And it is story and narrative ultimately that drives value, perception that drives desire, and desire that is the most pronounced aspect of luxury. So let's explore this stuff. My principles for a panel are provocation, conversation, debate, and frankly, no structure, because if we wanted structure, we could all go home and read a book. So my questions are loose, and we're going to get started. And I'm going to sit down, actually. I'm not going to stand up.
And I have a small presentation. Should I?
You have a presentation?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't discuss
We have a loop
this.
here.
May I?
Yeah, you want to start with that?
Hit the button, man.
I mean, when I was talking about no structure, I didn't mean it this literally. Well, hang on. You put the presentation in the background, but can we just get into your personal stories first? I'm running this show.
Sure.
Okay, look, you both have really interesting and very different personal journeys. And look, a panel, ultimately, is just a staid interview, unless you really get into the heart and soul of the people on the panel. So let's get into that. Max, let's start with you, seeing as you've already interrupted the whole flow and disrupted the structure. Tell us about your journey to where you are today. Let's get the human side of the story, rather than just all the accolades that I cited at the top end of this interview.
Okay, so let me be giving you the Walt Disney version. My name is Max Vidukal, but my real name is Maradukant Shantilal Vidukal, and that is a name given through astrology. And I've looked up on the Google and internet, and there's only me. This Maradukant Shantilal doesn't exist anywhere. So I honestly was baffled by it. But anyway, I grew up in Kenya. I was born there. I lived there for 9 years. It was the British colonial era of indentured labor, meaning that grandparents and my father and everybody were brought over from India to do lousy work for pittance, poor pay, and somehow you make your life come true. Indians are known for building from ground up. They work hard, strong education, strong families, and lo and behold, life was wonderful in Kenya. All I can tell you is they were the happiest years of my life, from 0 to 9, until one day we were thrown out of the country. You had to leave. I actually saw people getting burnt alive on the street, machetes chopping heads off. My father pulled me out of the shower and said, "You're leaving now. You can't ask for anything. We're going to England. No toys, nothing." We left for the plane, arrived in England. Lo and behold, I'm in Finchley, Woodside Park, home of Margaret Thatcher. There's about 10 of us living in a room, nowhere to go. I was speaking Gujarati, Swahili, and no English. At school, my name had to change to Max, otherwise you are not going to make it. So I killed Maradukant, but he's resurfing now a little bit. And I can say that basically my education is uneducated. I went to the School of Life. I left school at 16. Immediately, my passion was photography, and that's always been there. One thing, my purpose in life is only photography. I tried to find work in England at that time, which would have been 1979, 1980, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. So there was a big sense of like Third World War brewing or something like this. In any case, my work at this point was very, very raw. I didn't understand where I was going to head with the camera, but this is all I was interested in. I took my time to study photography, all the great photographers, by going to the library and studying books on William Klein, Cartier-Bresson, etc. Whereas always my friends who were my age were simply interested in getting laid. So I chose a different path. It's true. What happened then was that by the time I got to 19, I decided to find a job as a photographer assistant. After 500 phone calls on a rotary dial, one American answered the phone, and he said, "Ooh, you're 15 years old. I can use you. I can exploit you." I said, "Okay, I'm coming over." Straight to central London, Paddington. He said, "Don't come in the studio. I'll interview you outside." I waited outside, and up comes this guy who's about 7 feet tall, in blue denim, with cowboy boots, an orange mustache, and bald head. He's tall, except he's got a unicycle with him. A unicycle is a one-wheeled bike. And he brings it towards me, and I'm thinking, oh, what's going on here? He said, "I don't need you to know anything about photography, but if you can ride this bike in 3 days, you got the job." And I said, "Yeah, but this has got nothing to do with photography." He said, "If you want the job, you'll take it." In 3 days, after lots of fall, lots of blood being decapitated, my kneecaps and so on, I finally was able to go in a straight line. I did it. I took it back and got the job. £30 a month, which went immediately. I was enjoying my work. 6 months into it, I was a top assistant. But one day, he threw a curve. He did a semi-soft porn ad, or a shoot for a porn magazine. It freaking blew my head. I was like seriously shocked.
Especially as you'd already chosen not to get laid for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you couldn't, this was an absolute shocker for me. I was ready for a Edgar Allan Poe cover story to shoot, and instead there's a hot porn stories to shoot. This was a shocker for me. Of course, the next day I said to him, "I'm leaving." And he said, "Son, you ain't going anywhere, because I've trained you for 6 months, and if you leave, I'll make sure you never work again. I'm going to blacklist you," which he did. Cut it short, what does one do? I did anything that somebody should do. Pizza Hut, paper rounds, whatever it takes. I had enough money to go to New York. The plan was to go to New York and shoot the streets of New York. That's what I did. I spent 3 months shooting, living on park benches, etc., borrowed film and a camera, etc. Got back to England, processed my film, printed it, and I said, "Max, you're a genius. You've got it," because I knew I had the picture. You only need one picture. Like Orson Welles, one movie. You just need one. And I knew immediately that I had the vocabulary to go and do this thing that I call photography, and I want to really shake things up. Goal was, though, the British didn't like my work. I went to every magazine in England, and they said, "Your work is too aggressive for us, get out of here." I thought, okay, what next? My father would have gotten mad at me because I failed everything. But I had this genius idea. There was a great film called Midnight Express and Chariots of Fire, and the producer of that was David Putnam, Sir David Putnam, or Lord David Putnam. Out of the cold, I called him, and I said, "David, can you please call me back? It's Max Fiducal." That's it. 3 months later, he called. My father said, "It's David Putnam on the phone." I said, "Oh my God, no." Got on the phone, and he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "David, look, I'm a young photographer. I want to know if I'm wasting my time. I know you've had a really great idea about working with legends. I'm not one yet, but maybe you could tell me if I have a chance." And he said, "I don't have time for this. I don't do this." I went quiet. "Okay, send me 6 of your best prints. If they're any good, we can see each other. If they're no good, just pick up your stuff." 6 of the prints were good, so I was invited. He had them on the floor, and the first thing he said, "This is important, you are very good at what you're doing. Don't change. Continue. People will try to change you, Max." I said, "Who do you mean?" "Well, what sort of people?" He said, "Editors, publishers, art directors, they'll just want to manipulate you. That's what they do. They can't stop it. But you're going to have to resist it." I said, "Okay, thank you. That's very encouraging." As I was leaving, he said, "Wait, I'm not done. I need portraits of my producers and assistants and PAs, so can you do that? And I need an invoice. I've never raised an invoice in my life." I thought, oh my God, he's testing me out. I went back home, sat down with Pa, worked it out, £600, shot the whole lot, gave it to him, he gave me a check. Max, 600 pounds is a lot of money for a kid like you. What are you going to do? I said, well, I've got this theory that I should not belong to a place where I'm not loved. Always work where you're loved, I said. He said, so where are you going to go? I said, I'm going to go to a country called France, maybe Italy. They're Latin. I don't speak the language. And maybe they'll like me. They've got Helmut Newton there, Jean Lucieff. They've got a Guy Baudin. I mean, they've got a culture. Who knows? They might take a risk on me. And lo and behold, I did that. I went over, 3 weeks there, but within 3 weeks, 3 phone calls, 3 magazines, French Folk, Marie Claire, Elle. They all said, we love your stuff, but not just yet. But one guy, his name was Walter Rosberg, one of those French guys who just smoke cigarettes nonstop, and just really out of a cinema. Max, you are incredible, but you're wrong for me. 1 second, and he dials a phone. He says, Yoji Yamamoto, I've got a guy here. He's perfect for you. If you don't grab him, somebody else will. See him now. He put me in a cab. Off I went to Yoji. I showed the prints. He came out after 5 minutes and he said, you are going to shoot my next campaign. That was a turning point. You can imagine for a second, 21, 22, to hear penniless that you're going to shoot a campaign for somebody that's, he's an outsider. He's definitely not on the mainstream. He's on the sidewalk. And so within a week or two, I was in New York shooting the campaign, which are now historical pictures. And then I did the second one, and I've been doing it for 40 years. Still today, we're working. So that's the short point of it. To bring you right up to date, I'm now in a different department. I'm doing projects like those that you saw at the very opening with the ball. That's a climate change project that I did, loosely trying out. But essentially, I'm going after wherever there's human pollution. And I'm addressing human behavior rather than something else. But essentially, my wife hates them because she says, I'm not putting garbage on the wall. And I said, well, come on, I've just sold 3 of them to a museum. Important museums. I've been allowed to do it now, so that's the story.
I've got a, we will come to your introduction in a second. And if you could please prepare the supporting visuals for the second introduction. But I actually have a question. I think we were discussing somewhere between the 4th and 5th glass of wine last night. We've become great friends in the space of 24 hours. I think you actually mentioned, Maura, like some people start as commercial artists, or they work to a commercial brief, and others start as artists and then they're commercialized. And this is obviously the central theme of what we're here to talk about today. Did you, just as the last question to your introduction, did you see yourself as an artist commercialized, or did you see yourself as a working photographer, commercial first, then turned into art?
I've never thought of myself as anything but a photographer. Don't use the word artist. I'm a photographer. Okay. If you think it's art, that's fine. That's in your eyes. I am a photographer. I've always seen that. In fact, I use that title on my card.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Would you talk us through your journey as well?
Well, after hearing Max's life story, I feel so humbled and so uninteresting that...
Come on now, you're interesting.
No, I basically have almost nothing to say, so... I'm Portuguese. I always loved art. I spent my life since I can remember inside museums and galleries and antique dealers. But I didn't know that since I have no gift for any kind of art, I wish I could sing well, for instance. I can't. So I had to decide what to study. So I didn't want to be an art history teacher, so I decided to study law because I thought it was like a good degree. It really organizes your mind in a good way. So that's what I did, even though my passion was art, and I spent all my free time seeing art and meeting the artists I could, visiting the studios I could. And I was at the same time informally studying art history. So I did law at the Universidade Católica. Then I applied to, well, then I did, I finished like the cycle. I did my internship, took the Bar Association exam, applied to all the internships literally all over the world. I really wanted to work for the UN in New York, and I couldn't believe when I was chosen. So I went to New York to intern, and then I was again chosen to work for the International Criminal Court projects. It was still a project, now it exists, the International Criminal Court. And I was basically monitoring the war crimes section, which was quite difficult. It was really interesting, but really tough. And everything every day was about serious things and difficult things and issues around the world. And then you discover many things when you work at the UN that I don't want to address right now. It doesn't make sense. So I thought, I'm in New York. Now I can see that I can have a career in something I always loved and basically something I always did, which was being in some way, in a very humble way, inside the art world. So I took the master's at NYU in arts administration. I always wanted to study at NYU. I started interning and then working for the New Museum of Contemporary Art, which I did for 5 years. And then I came back to Portugal because I met my husband. So husbands and wives today are quite present in the talk today. But I knew that I only remember that I have a law degree when sometimes I have to write my profession and it's so difficult to explain and long that I just write jurist or lawyer because I have my inscription at the Bar Association suspended. So basically, I represent Philips Auction House in Portugal and Spain for the past 16 years. I teach art markets, collecting practices, curating at the Catholic University in Porto and Lisbon. And I do projects for institutions and companies that want to put together art and the market in general. So I've been doing many projects throughout the years. And something else I also do is when international museum boards come to Portugal, and they do come very often with very important patrons from all over the world, and they need the help for someone to design a trip that is really special and someone that can open some doors of both private collections and institutions and make them have a wonderful time and see Portugal in the best possible way. I'm also helping them to do that. So basically that's
As a ex-New Yorker and an ex-New Yorker, and I was in New York last week, can we just agree that since COVID, the potency of the smell of weed all over New York has become about 30 times worse than before?
It's true, mate.
Yes.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a real stinker.
Really smells. Sorry, it's a little bit off topic. Okay, so listen, Mara, how have you seen the art market change over your tenure working in the industry, and its relationship with brands and, the level of levity and fun and joy? And I feel like the market takes itself perhaps less seriously now than it did a decade ago.
Absolutely.
Is that true?
No, absolutely. I think that it changed a lot. I think there were a lot of prejudices, and I think that both brands and artists understood that it can be a great combination. It can really help both sides. It can give opportunities to, and then you will give your opinion about that, I'm sure. But obviously, I think there's a need to be respect, the need to create boundaries. But I think that brands and art can really help themselves a lot to position themselves, to get more exposure, to help artists to have other means, to challenge artists to be more creative and to challenge brands to be more creative. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And also when we speak about art, we are speaking about normally the 0.001% of the population of the world. So when you gather art and artists, I mean brands and artists, many times you really achieve a very good match of sophistication, culture, creativity, opportunities, and I think it benefits in general if it's well negotiated, if there's a good level of, if there's a good match. As for you, Yohji Yamamoto and you, it was a perfect match, and it lasts until today. And you really work well together. So I think this is a great example. And in the room we have, brands and Portuguese brands that must be proud because they've been working with artists from several different areas a lot. I see Renova that has been commissioned, really interesting things because not only worked with amazing photographs throughout the years, but also performing arts, so many different projects. Vista Alegre, the same, that has been working with artists and also fashion designers like Oscar de la Renta and Christian Lacroix, for instance. So I think Viva Lamego, for instance, that works a lot with artists. So I think that we have so many different examples of, both parts excel when they work together.
Can I? So there'll be lots of brands here who perhaps want to collaborate with artists, artisans, people with creative cultural influence. Max, you're on the other side of the table. You're an artist, photographer.
Steady on there with the words, mate.
Steady on. You're a photographer / artist. What is it that breeds a healthy collaboration? What is the briefing process? What's the courting process? How do you get something that isn't contrived or sort of loses its integrity through the process of collaboration benefiting neither party?
Good question, and let me answer that. The thing is, if I work for myself, the only thing I'm interested in is, am I going to be happy at the end of the day? Because I have to go to bed. So when a brand approaches you, or let's say an ad agency approaches you with a certain demand, I would say I failed possibly 90% of the time in the early part of my career, total disasters. I mean, I did something for Walmart, which was a CLM BBDO. It was a French agency. The art director was Lucy Pardo. She is amazing. And she said, okay, we want Walmart, and they want you to do whatever you want. So you know what I did? I hired 2 sheep and 2 girls and a skipping rope. And the picture was quite crazy. Of course, it was killed. I mean, the client, Walmart couldn't deal with it.
Can you just because this is too meaty to not get into?
Because there's humor in it.
Can you just bring to life what actually was in that image?
I just look at the girl. She's dressing as in Elia. I've got 2 sheep, which is where the wool comes from, and I have a skipping rope. So I make a picture that, to me, is going to be entertaining. To my mind, this picture's got to be something out of the ordinary, not the normal nice picture. So the picture, now she has it in a wall 35 years later, and she's not giving me this print back. The thing is, It was a failure, though. Okay, it didn't get out. Many cases of this kind of thing. What I'm getting at is that you attract what you deserve. I'm not for everyone, I'm not for anyone, but only for the right one. And this kind of, we can say, extermination of garbage is only possible by being very tough on your choices of who you work with and who you're going to allow to have close to your art or your mind or whatever, because it's a big effort. The whole process to create that image that is going to be penetrating people's subconscious on the street, on the pavement. The Y3 campaign that you saw at the very beginning for Adidas is a great example of something they wanted that I did in 1984, but they wanted to do it in 2024. Exactly coming back to something so analog, so raw, that for me it was easy because I only do, this is only one way to do things for me. So it's dead easy to do. But why ask for something like this today?
Well, because there's something interesting, isn't it, about the cycles of culture. You start with things that are already out there that define or perfectly summarize a cultural sort of moment in time, and then 10 years on, they're ironic.
Yes, absolutely.
Basically, do you know what I mean? And they're...
Completely. And those pictures on the streets in Chinatown, I don't know if you saw those things, next to other ads, it's a statement. I mean, it's bold, it's aggressive, it jumps at you, there's nothing like it. Only one person in the world could shoot that. That's what I make sure of. So coming to a relationship like Yoji is, how does it arrive that we are able to collaborate silently together? Because I don't speak Japanese. He speaks English, but up to a point.
That's a relief.
Yes, up to a point.
A long-term collaborator he's never spoken to.
We have very little to say to each other. Honestly, he just says, do it. And when you finish with your work, it's published the way you see it, it's published the way you wanted it, and sometimes better than you saw it. And you never get a smack in the mouth or a nasty email or anything. They're very, very perfect. Now, I'd rather have one client like that. You only need one confident client, not more than one. If you have more than one, then you can't share that image because it has to be unique for the brand. I cannot give that to somebody else.
But I feel like your message to the brands is almost do your research on who you hire and then take the risk.
Correct. That's exactly right.
And there will be no dance.
There shouldn't be.
Sorry, and the opposite, if a brand approaches you, you need to do your homework and see if you're aligned with the brand, if there's like a common platform, and if it will make sense, and try to see if it will work. Yeah. Because it has to work both ways.
Well, hang on a second. Sorry to butt in here, but I'm telling you, I know what happens here. I told you I've done disgraceful stuff that I'm ashamed of because I took the money. You know why? Because I have to pay for the school, the education, the university. And New York is a nasty place to exist in. You'll be bleeding dollars every day. You won't even understand where it's going. You step out of the house and money just comes out. You're accepting things that you would never shoot in your life.
You can't admit that stuff.
Yeah, I admit it. I mean, I've shot some crap, loads of it. But honestly, those are bad days. Those are bad days where you sit up, bolt upright at 3 o'clock in the morning on the bed and you go, what did I do? What did I do? I betrayed myself.
Everything you shoot that's publicly known becomes a part of your identity that's presumably very difficult as an artist/photographer to escape.
Yeah, no, that's right. I burnt most of it. Thank God it's analog and there's no replicas of it around. But I mean, it was hideous stuff. But it got my twins through university, so that's that. I got my money back from one kid who is now a New York Times journalist, and it's well spent.
Speaking of analog, do you have a TikTok account?
No, I do not have a TikTok account. I do not have a TikTok account. I'm sort of curious, but I don't know what. Actually, I'll be honest. I stay away from any of those things. And just to go, I've been hearing a lot of technology today, and AI, and many, many things. I firmly believe that I know something that you don't know, because my foot is in the 20th century, and the 21st. And I'm still trusted by very blue chip brands to do what I do best. And it's not coming from a computer. It's coming from deep within my journey. And I'm informed by my experience from Africa to a mother who dresses in a sari, not in Yves Saint Laurent or Christian Dior. I don't brag about my mum walking around in high heels in Dolce & Gabbana. She wears a sari. She has a little dot on her forehead. This is my story. But through this, I can channel my work. And I'm telling you, it's all emotional. There is no clever therapy here, there's no clever strategy here. When I grab hold of a camera and a subject, I'm going to steal everything from you. My wife described me as a robber. Max is a bandit. He'll just take everything from you. And the camera and the photography is what I go for. It's so exciting for me when I know I have the picture. Like I was telling you, the Mother Teresa picture I did in India was amazing. I turned her into a piece of liquid. All these lines on her face, no plastic surgery, and she was amazing. The picture is one of the best shots I've ever done. And look, again, I won't say best because one shot's not enough. My total thing is it's the total commitment. So there's no such thing as what's your best shot. I would say my best shot is my total commitment.
What is the commercial collaboration? In fact, this is a question to both of you. What's the commercial collaboration that you feel has driven the most economic, the most impact, what's the thing that you feel has both artistic and sort of photographic integrity, as well as the thing that you feel has driven the greatest commercial success?
Sorry, distill that again to something I can understand.
What's worked well? Examples of campaigns that you think have worked really well and why?
Me?
Yeah. Well, both of you actually.
Okay, just anybody.
Just things that have driven commercial success. Things that have put a brand in front of new audiences.
All right, let's go with Olivero Toscani Benetton. All right, let's just talk about that for a second. Do any of you remember that?
Yes, absolutely.
Come on. That is a genius. I mean, he is a great, great thinker. Yes, and if you don't have big enemies around you, then you're not doing something right. You know, that's how it goes. His thinking behind Benetton, what is it, a sweater company? I don't know what they do. I mean, the sweaters, I guess. But when he came out with his Benetton ads with the AIDS patients, with the popes and the religious people kissing each other, the mixed race couples, etc., is way ahead. Highly, highly, highly far ahead. And his personality is, in my opinion, is one of the greatest, I would say, creative commercial collaborations of my time, certainly. You know, because it had social impact. It wasn't just a Richard Avedon shoot with Versace for 15 years with supermodels. This thing was hard-hitting. And today, if you look at it, it still sticks. It still resonates. I mean, he just understood, because he's a journalist first. And being a journalist, and his father was a journalist, the first photographer journalist of Corriere della Sera. And this has been ingrained in him. And if you don't approach something, in my opinion, through journalism and curiosity and news, you're not capable of achieving any meaningful result. You're just going to be another clown.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real sea of sameness today in luxury fashion. You know, you have instances of the same photographer, like, is it David Sims? Is it David Sims, if I got the name right?
Like the guy who shoots most of the ads, Stephen Meisel.
Stephen Meisel.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I mean, he's done like 11 of like all the major.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah,
about that
Stephen is but he's the go-to person for fashion.
Well, we're meant to be in luxury fashion. Let's take fashion particularly. You know, it's a segment of the market that's supposed to promote creativity. It's meant to be about individual perspectives. It's meant to, you know, in a way that's kind of undermined when you've got the same creative directors and the same photographers just literally doing the rounds, like campaign after campaign after campaign.
But to your point, that's why the industry, you know, when we talk about fashion, it's not just fashion. We've cannibalized our industry. We are the ones who did it, all right? Don't blame anybody else. You're sitting here because, well, you've been invited. But imagine if you allowed everybody to sit here. You wouldn't have any value. The moment they allowed front row on the runway with people who really don't know anything about culture or fashion or art history, it was the end of the game. Game up. It's over. And now they can't really breathe. They can barely breathe.
Do you think it's harder to be expressive in a cancel culture environment? If you're I mean, of course it is, but what's the relationship between cancel culture brands and photography?
And a lot of photographers were cancelled. I mean, front page of the New York Times. I don't know if you know that. It was a shocker to me. Front page of the New York Times, 2 very famous photographers, very high earning, destroyed. And then a truckload after that. I personally remained the black and white guy that nobody should book. Now, he just does black and white. We don't want to go there. But today, I'm here and I'm killing it. No, really, I'm on top of my game. Art exhibitions at the Maxi Museum in Rome, Galleria d'Italia, Fondazione Sozzani, 3 months here, 3 months there. And I'm doing more projects. I go to Bhutan to do almost 2.5 weeks following a beautiful project. This is the cherry on the cake that fashion photographers will never have. But why me? I'm not asking for it. I'm chosen. And then I do the best I can with the card I'm given. Just to be here today is an honor. I'm extremely honored to be sitting here listening to everybody. I've paid attention to everybody talking. I'm trying to understand art history. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Sorry.
Okay. We'll continue the conversation.
Yeah, you'll have to educate me because I just don't get it.
Well, why don't you let's tackle this small subject then. What is art history?
Well, that will, if you have time to stay here until at least in 1 week, it takes a lot of time. But there's something I would like to say in terms of art and brands, and I think it's interesting, and I don't need my presentation. I gave up.
Sorry.
No, I don't need it. I don't need it. Seriously. No. I gave up. No. Seriously, I don't need it. No, don't put it on.
Put it on, buddy. Put it on.
No, seriously, please, take my word. No, I just want to say that I think that even auction houses that were seen for many years as, the art market in an extreme way, now work very closely with artists, supporting exhibitions. For the past years, we basically sponsored exhibitions all over the world. We sponsored artists. We sponsored artist foundations. Almost in all of our sales, we have a small group of works that is going to be auctioned to benefit a foundation. So again, when we were speaking about how much the market changed in the past 10 years, 15 years, I think that obviously there's always a tension, as you said, but at the same time, I think that there's a closer relationship, and I think that I don't see the world always pink. I'm very positive, it's true, but I see that many things have changed, and I see how much, in some way the market, and at least us as an auction house, support artists and support exhibitions. And for instance, we paid for the last exhibition at Meg Foundation, at the Whitney Museum. Now we are doing a collaboration with Hind Wiley, selling some of his prints to benefit his foundation in Nigeria. So just to say that in a very positive way, I think the market changed and relationships with artists also changed. Going back to your previous question about, and you gave an amazing example of Oliviero Toscani, amazing. Yep. And I think that one of the best exhibitions I saw in my life, and when I say exhibition, is not fashion exhibition, it's just exhibition period. And actually this exhibition was elected in the year it happened as the best exhibition in the US, was the exhibition the Metropolitan Museum, the Met, made of Alexander McQueen. And it was a stunning exhibition, from the layout, the music, the sound, the smell. Everything was planned so carefully that it was like a collective experience, and a lot of people left the exhibition crying, even if they didn't know anything about Alexander McQueen, even if they didn't like Alexander McQueen, and it was elected the best exhibition of the year in the US. So just to say that I'm very happy to see that boundaries, limits are not so stiff as they used to be. And I think we can all profit a lot from it, and don't feel like, obviously you need to have your limits. What you do is amazing, and you know exactly what you do. But in general, I think the world for artists and brands, it's much more collaborative, and it's respectful, and I see it in a very positive way for the future.
I think there's something interesting in the point around the McQueen exhibition, in maybe the role brands can play, or maybe even the responsibility brands should take in kind of like immortalizing cultural moments. You know, that we've built a capitalist world, and brands are at the center of the value exchange between us and our societies. And I think it's interesting to consider that something that is more serious than just an exhibition, but rather, a sort of record of history, which kind of interests me. Max, you've seen all sorts of different creative fads and trends and things that then become culture. And what's your opinion on, and we're moving into a world that's becoming more and more short-termist, and what do you think, when does a fad become a trend?
Fad. Hula hoop is a fad or a trend, I don't know, but it was, right?
Yeah, felt like a fad.
Fad, right. A trend,
Unless you're in
trending now. For me personally, to observe what's going on in terms of my area, sphere, certainly with fashion and popular culture, it's moving so quickly and it's changing so quickly that I will say, and I'll say this boldly, I don't believe anymore in any trend. There is no trend. There's only me. I'll decide. Because there's too many voices out there, too many echoes. How many of you are really voices? Most of us are just echoes. And that's where it's at. So I don't think in terms of trends, well, let's do this because that's the new trend. Let's go this way. This is what it used to be like in the 80s and 90s. It just, everybody's shooting the blonde girl or the girl with the red head or the freckles or whatever, because that's the trend thing to do. No, we're finished with this. Today, I think, myself, that if you don't understand, it's down to you personally, personal responsibility as an artist with your eye, with whatever you do, it's down to you. If I do something and it works, and it turns into a fad or a trend, it's not something I planned. It just rolls. But I cannot predict what's going to happen next. I have no idea.
What about from your side of the table?
I think that now with, the speed of information, I think that for something to become a trend, it needs a certain period of time to be established as a trend. And I think that we go so fast with, social media, influencers. It goes too fast that a trend doesn't have enough time to become a trend. It's very difficult to say, this is trendy. It's a word I hate, but, because it's too fast. We don't have enough time today because tomorrow there's something new that's coming up and people turn their interest into something else. So no time for that, I think.
Yeah, so basically trends sort of almost don't have enough room to germinate.
Very difficult.
COVID has a better chance.
How do you...
Come on, laugh.
Laugh?
That was funny.
This is really funny, yeah. What do you think it takes to sort of make or break credibility in art and advertising? You know, when does an advert become disingenuous? Photography.
I think, honestly, that if you're not going to be authentic, retouching is a big problem. The digital retouching is a massive problem. I was just looking at this picture I did of this very young Buddhist monk who is destined for greatness. And instantly, the first thing that my digital text says, shall I remove these spots on his face, or these zits? I said, no, don't touch anything. It's against their nature to not mess with the skin, because they're doing it every day. You see a woman, a girl, and she's been manipulated. It's a total lie. You can be sure pretty much everything you're seeing out there is a lie. I'm sorry. The moment you move a pixel, it's a lie. I said, don't touch him at all, because he's a holy man. Don't touch him. This would be wrong. Work with the authenticity, work with the tones, but don't do anything. Imagine you're in a dark room. What would you do? You're not going to mess around with the skin, and the skin is very important. And I think today people know when it's really off. They know it. Of course, on an iPhone, on TikTok or whatever, it's like animated, it's funny or whatever it is. That's something different. But when you put billboards outside and you have it in the public consciousness, they're driving, they see at the airport a huge billboard, you pass by on the street, you see it. If you're authentic and your message is real, it will ring like something that didn't exist before, because everything is completely false.
How does your industry in general manage its relationship with the truth? And what are the just...
I think it's appalling, because what they do is nearly always, we want to retouch this. We want to. Can we move this here? Okay, for advertising, certain ads, it's okay, because they take charge of everything. But when it comes to doing work which is I classify as editorial, personal, or artwork that I do, I mean, I keep it as honest as I can. And that's my thing with it. I say, don't touch, don't touch. I'm always saying that. So there is that part of it, because they can't hesitate to play with the little brush, and just change the skin, pull the eyes back or whatever. I mean, it's just horrific. As far as I'm concerned, if you're naturally beautiful, I will love you. I will look at you and stare at you non-stop. It's beautiful to me. This manipulation of the skin is a horror house. It really is nasty. That's how I see it. So I don't do beauty ads.
What's your opinion on this theme?
I think that Max is addressing something very specific, and I completely understand and agree with him. Again, I think that when there's a collaboration, partnership, sponsorship, whatever relation between a brand and an artist, I think if the homework is well done, if there are conversations, boundaries, are very explicit. Also, there's flexibility from both parts enough, I think it can work, and it can be a good match. So every case is different, We all know cases where it worked well. We all know cases where it doesn't work, or it didn't work, or artists felt that, they did things they wouldn't do, but they needed the money, or they needed the exposure. Brands hired people, and they weren't happy with the final result. So again, I'm always trying to see it both ways, but I think that a good match can happen if, there's, when the values are aligned, when the ideas are aligned, when the message is aligned, when everyone is on the same page. I think that there might be tension, but it can work, and it will work.
Okay. This is a searching question for you. How does the art market how does the art industry influence perception to create value?
I think that obviously, normally, the perception we have of art when it comes to a certain level is that there is value to it. That obviously can always be increased, but thinking about the work I do, it's like I read a lot, and we all, I think that everyone that works in the art world, we read a lot. We know who are the art curators, the art critics, the most important museums, institutions, foundations, private collections, and when we see that someone is recognized by all this universe, we see that at least for a certain period of time, because again, in the art market, sometimes things go very fast. And in this moment, we have artists that are part of art history, and their value in the market is low, and artists that are very young, and galleries invented the waiting list. So when a gallery says to someone that is quite young and doesn't know enough about the art market and says, oh, we have a waiting list, that person will want to buy that artist. And sometimes that artist only lasts for a few months in the art world. But if you have information about, so much about the artist and what he has done, his career, everything like you are doing, for so many years, I think that we can recognize value. It's not difficult. Okay. It's just...
Thank you for that. I think we've overrun, probably because of my waffling. Can we just end with some closing thoughts from both of yourselves on the theme of the relationship between brands and art?
Okay, I'll have a stab at this. I think brands and artists / photographer, illustrator, whatever, we need each other, because you give us a platform from which to build an image. At the same time, we need the funding to continue doing personal work. The only reason I would take commercial work for any reason and try to give them part of my signature is because I need the funds to go on to the next project. And I think it's very valuable when you can find a partner such as the one I have in Yoji, that understands who you are, understands your language, and understands the emotional connection that I'm able to give to this brand so that they can communicate to their public. That is the ultimate. There are very few brands out there that can understand this. Most of them don't understand it because they don't really know who they are. So it's the same old song. If you don't know who you are, your dog ain't going to be trained. You can try to teach that puppy everything you want, but if you're not in charge of yourself, they'll sense it. And that's the way I see it. But it is a very important part of building into pop culture, photography, in galleries and so on. Somebody who believes in you, a brand that believes in you, that is an amazing partnership. Behind everything I've done, there's always somebody behind me who has absolutely been more or less 50% or more of my strength. That can be a brand like Yoji, can be my wife, or it can be just me all alone. But it's a lonely journey.
I just have to say that I think that this is a very interesting path that will continue. I think that more and more will happen, more collaborations, more sponsorships. I was just, last week at Frieze in London, and Deutsche Bank Wealth Management has a lounge and invited an artist, very, how can I say, alternative, very young, to do a project. And you expect this launch to be very chic, very elegant, and it was quite raw, quite challenging. So I think there's an openness from both sides to make it even more interesting for everybody. And I do believe that's what will happen. It's that the more and more it will happen, and the more and more it will be really interesting for all of us to see and to observe what will be done between brands and artists.
Be less boring, basically, Deutsche
Yeah.
Bank. Okay, great. Well, a big round of applause for these two talents.
Thank you.